Well, today we have on Mr. Josh Deel. He's a senior producer at PBS Appalachia. Mr. Deel, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on, folks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming on. I think I can speak for both me and Ethan. We're very excited to have you on today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Most of our viewers may know you. You have a show called Hometown, and you actually did an episode about Carroll County, Virginia, and that's where we live, and that's where most of our audience is situated.
Yep.
And I can speak for both me and Ethan when I say we've heard many people did enjoy the episode.
Yeah.
I thot it was interesting.
It was
actually recognized some people in the episode.
Yeah.
So
I like hearing that. That's awesome.
It's pretty neat seeing your hometown on the big screen.
Yeah, it's strange because you live somewhere and you work and go to school every day in that area, and it's weird to see that portrayed from an outsider's point of view.
Right.
So that was very interesting. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But to start off, we always ask our interviewee, where did you grow up?
Where'd I grow up? Well, moved around just a little bit in my younger years. Originally from Tennessee, kind of the Smoky Mountains area. And then my folks moved us to kind of Southwest Virginia, and then ultimately landed in Southern West Virginia. So spent a lot of my youth and teenage years there. But then once I left school, got married pretty young, and then we've essentially been in Virginia ever since, and that's been almost 20 years ago.
Wow. So where did you graduate from high school?
Yeah, so I officially graduated from a small school called Pikeview High School.
Okay.
It's near Princeton, West Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that a fairly large school or kind of small?
No, it was small. I'm not even sure if it was double A at the time, maybe double A.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah. In school, were you fairly academic? Did you really try to study hard and have good grades, or were you kind of mellow?
No.
No, you were mellow?
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. I mean, I grew up in a home that, like, my father's fairly intellectual. His favorite pastime is playing the game of chess. And there's always a bookshelf full of books. And so we were a family that read a lot, growing up. I do know that. So that was probably instilled at a pretty young age in my life. But once I got into school, I don't know. I was never really pushed, but I never really strove to be academic in those years, through high school. I was always an A/B student. It just came easy. I think I might have been bored with it. But I think my main focus when I was younger as a teenager was athletics. So I played a lot of baseball, and I was trying to pursue that, and make it to the show, make it to the big leagues or whatever. And that's a story in and of itself, but that's kind of my younger years, not very academically focused, but certainly wasn't something that I struggled with either.
Right. Is that something you wanted to pursue as you got older, maybe playing in college or professionally?
Yeah. There was a brief stint in life where the New York Mets had kind of talked with me, as far as like prospect development leagues, that type of thing. But ultimately, I decided to forego that because in my 20s, and I think that this might have something to do with certain parts of the brain beginning to actually develop fully. There's a lot of studies that show that now, like the higher cognitive portions of the brain, aren't even fully formed until you're about 25. But I do recall it was like a light switch moment when I just had a thirst to really buckle down and just learn. I was obsessed with learning something about everything, and so it was like my own renaissance, if you will. Becoming like a Renaissance man, reading everything I could get my hands on, from political science to antiquities, ancient history, to you name it. Right, just really went through a season there. For almost a decade of that, just poring over books and trying to become, I guess, a closet scholar or something. I don't know.
Is there any book from that period that really affected you personally?
Oh, man, it's kind of difficult to pinpoint one at this moment. I've got a bookshelf full. Largely, I would say it's more of probably a genre. I really like, I kind of joke. I say when I grow up, I want to be Indiana Jones, right? And that's a movie that stuck. I grew up in the '80s and 90s, and that's a movie that was obviously part of my childhood. But it just spoke to me in so many different ways, ironically. But I loved the overall passion for history and antiquities, and there was even a time in my life when I applied to University of Edinburgh in Scotland for a program in classical studies, and that was something that I think I wanted to do. I really wanted to pursue that at some capacity, but the reality at the time, I was also married and we just had our first kid, and there was a lot of dynamics that ultimately, even though I was accepted, changed that. But so really, to get back to your question on point, like I really like ancient history, antiquities. That's really where I ended up. Studying a lot of the philosophers, that type of thing. A lot of the great books. I don't know if you're familiar with that set. I think it's like a 54 volume set thereabouts called the Great Books. Goes from Homer all the way to Freud.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a huge classical set. I'm not going to sit here and act like I've read every page of that. That would be,
of course, but
that's a lifetime pursuit. Mm-hmm. In more recent years, though, I think I found like my interest kind of leaning towards 19th century history. I'm fascinated with that time period, late 1700s going into 19th century. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
There you go. Hey.
What did you do immediately after high school?
Yeah, well, that was kind of that chapter of life where I was pursuing baseball,
Okay, yeah. So were you playing in a minor league or just training kind of full time?
Yeah, both. It was like a developmental league. I mean, leagues have restructured a lot since then.
Okay.
Actually, I'd kind of gone to like a junior college as well. I really had no, at the time, ambition to go to a big college or anything like that. I was just obsessed with, let's get in the minor leagues, let's start playing ball. So again, looking back, maybe a little more guidance, more mentorship, would have been prudent. But who's to say what's right, what's wrong? I mean, this is where I am today, and that's part of the stepping stones, that have led to this part of the story.
It worked from the looks of it. Yeah. What did you, when you were in that process of getting better at baseball, really working on your craft, did you know that you wanted to shift away from that at any point, or did you just kind of end up leaving?
No, I mean, ultimately, I think, we can, I probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about that chapter of life because once I met what would have become my wife, that kind of sealed the deal for me, fellas. I was like, I kind of want to go a different direction now.
Sure.
So,
And how old were you when you met her?
I actually had kind of met her before graduating high school, so 18-ish, something like that.
Yeah.
But as far as like romantically involved, later on. So, but that and accumulation of some injuries and whatnot, like it is what it is, man. I just said it's time to try something else in life.
So did you decide to go to school after your career ended in baseball?
Guys, I have dabbled a lot in a lot of different things from hard manual labor, construction, framing houses. So I feel like I've lived multiple lifetimes. Yeah. And it's interesting because you go through different iterations, you find what doesn't suit you. Went through a season of job hopping, got into sales. That's something else that I've done over the years is I did get like a variety of kind of sales, business related licenses and so forth, getting into insurance and financial kind of planning and that type of thing. And that's kind of been in the background, for the past many years. It was not really anything I ever had a passion for, but it could certainly, I saw the potential that it had to pay bills, and afford you the flexibility that a typical 9-to-5 wouldn't afford. And I do, a lot of people ask me, or they don't ask me, but it comes out sometimes. And I say, well, I've made a living off being unemployable. And that's really the truth of it. But largely being autodidactic, very self-taught, self-learning. Even though I've gone on and pursued, other education and so forth, most of what I wanted to ever learn in life wasn't formally, at the hands of a teacher, a professor or whatever. Just picking up books. It's picking up,
of course,
skills. Even filmmaking, where I am today. I didn't go to film school. This is all self-taught, and now I've certainly had help, and I've reached out and I've collaborated. And that's expedited, right, the learning curve. Yeah, I try to take sole responsibility or responsibility for what I want to learn, the projects that I want to do.
Luke and I often joke that school gets in the way of our learning.
Sure.
And
yeah, because
there may be some truth to it.
It's very structured, and there has to be some structure to it when you're at a certain age. But I do believe that sometimes it does hamper people's passions, what they really like to do.
Yeah.
Well, the world is now changing so quickly with technology and information moving at a pace that we've never really witnessed in our collective human history. And so I think that there's a lot of disruption within archaic, somewhat calcified educational structures. Now many are trying to keep pace, right? But I mean, there's so many folks that are doing phenomenally without having to get necessarily a formal learning path for that. Again, not to, I know we'll probably get into talking about the filmmaking, but like with documentary filmmaking or any type of filmmaking for that matter, you can go the very structured route of film school. But I've talked with several people who have done that. They've gone that route, but they are still, it's almost like any field that you probably would choose. You choose a major or whatever in college or something like that, but then you still have to get real world hands-on experience. Yeah. So sometimes just jumping in the deep end is its best teacher.
Of course. Yeah. We found that to be true with this.
Yeah.
Because we're not formally educated.
Right. There you go. Well, I mean, it can produce a lot of anxiety, but I think that for anyone who's trying to achieve something, that there's going to be a certain measure of that just kind of comes with it.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When did you decide that you really wanted to pursue filmmaking?
Yeah, good question. So, guys, probably, I was interested in films, and we called them camcorders back in the day, okay?
Right.
And made these little like home videos and whatnot. And even my last year there in high school, one of my electives that I chose was the like closed circuit television for the school. It was just an easy credit. Honestly, I thought I could just sleep through it or something. But I actually found out that it was fun to kind of piece these little sketches and skits and stuff together, and played around with it some. Fast forward many years to just like a couple of years ago, that desire, that kind of hobby to play with cameras and tell stories with little videos, that was there. But I mean, it wasn't going to pay any bills, and it's kind of an expensive hobby. But it was about 2 years ago, last year, the beginning of 2022, that I reached out to Jacob Dillinger, who's actually the EP, the executive producer at PBS Appalachia, and he has almost 20 years experience in film in a number of capacities. And I just said, I really think that I have the aptitude. I think that I can do something with this. I just need to expedite the process, that learning curve, because I didn't go to film school. I'm not getting any younger, but I think, if I could just shadow you, if I could just follow you around, if I could collaborate with you, I think that I could pick stuff up. So I did that, most of last year. Wasn't a paid gig or anything. I was just doing that, picking up a camera, started my own project, Mountain Roots, and started in my backyard with a multi-episode series I've called Exploring Appalachia. And it just started to blow up, millions of viewers. And now I think the other day I saw we're over 100,000 followers. And it's just, that thing keeps, mushrooming. And that was just a project, kind of like what you guys are doing with your podcast here. There was no formality to it. I just wanted to do it. And I look back on it and, you know, some of my production quality, I kind of cringe at now. I'm like,
yeah, I feel that.
But I leave it up there nonetheless, because ironically, some of those earlier ones are now some of the most viewed. And it just, for me, it's a catalog of growth, you know, and I can see that there. Yes. So, but to get again back to your question, so at the beginning of this year, 2023, I was approached, you know, by PBS, and like what I was doing there, and offered me a role to kind of continue that, but with launching this new station called PBS Appalachia. It's the first all digital public broadcast station in the country. That's never been done before.
Yeah, I was reading about that earlier. That's pretty neat. I saw that Cardinal News done an article on PBS Appalachia, which is pretty neat. It's a pretty big name, and I guess you're bigger now than Cardinal News.
Well, I mean, Cardinal News. There's been several that you know have picked up on it, and it's been a wild ride. Even just the station officially launched in June of this year, and we walked away just a few short weeks later with a pile of Emmys and awards and stuff for various pieces that we produced and put together. So I think it put a lot of wind in all of our sails that this is something that people want, that they like this type of content in the programming. But yeah, so to answer your question fully, I would say it was February of this year that I officially decided, hey, this is what I want to do. I'm going to make this step to be a full-time filmmaker. Because even though you can get hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, you can't live or rely on that money if and when you get it, you know, because sometimes it can be decent, but other times it's not even going to put fuel in the vehicle to get you to the locations that you need to film. Right. So, so the PBS role has really helped a good bit in that aspect. And I have been working myself out of my finance company that I built. So man, I'm all in now with film and storytelling.
You're doing well at it. So,
were you a big fan of PBS before you started working for them?
Honestly, and don't tell them this, I really never watched PBS. I mean, I just with the exception of maybe some Ken Burns documentaries here and there. Because again, just his own fascination with kind of 19th century American U.S. history. I'm not going to say that I sit here and I agree with him on every point or conclusion he comes to, but I appreciate nonetheless his work and that type of thing, his body of work. And so, if anything, I would say that's probably that. And I think there's been a few Appalachian-based kind of coal documentaries based, around the coal type of thing. So some of that stuff, but really outside of that, I don't know, guys. I just not really. I mean, I'm probably like a lot of people out here. I appreciate a good documentary. I mean, I really am interested in that. I don't really watch a whole lot of TV. So whether it's on PBS or Netflix or wherever, if it's intriguing, has good characters and a interesting story, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, me and Ethan both like documentaries. We've actually interviewed John Bernardo. He made a documentary about the $2 bill.
Right.
So we both love documentaries.
That was a neat one.
Yeah. Which documentaries do you enjoy, specifically? Is there any one that you really attach to?
Yeah, well, I try to keep myself from latching on to any particular one or type of one or subject matter. I just like to watch a variety of things because as a creator myself and not just a consumer, I'm always collecting ideas. I'm always in kind of the research and development mode. So whether it's something like there's one called Dirty Money. I think it's on Netflix now.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that.
2018. It's episodic.
Yeah.
Or it could be something as goofy as Tiger King. I mean, as annoying as that is, what's interesting about it, again, from the producer director side, is that what makes a good story are characters, and not just flat one-dimensional characters, but if you can find a character who's obsessed with something, maybe they've had an obsession for a long time, or if they've got an obsession and some conflict or controversy surrounding them, that's a great character. And you're probably going to have a good story. And like it or not, that's why Tiger King is probably the most viewed, or one of the highest viewed documentaries on Netflix. Again, it's not like, I don't have a Tiger King shirt or anything. But for me, it's just being a purveyor, of subject matter. But yeah, I've always liked film. But I find myself now, I'm really drawn to the kind of documentary renaissance that's actively happening in front of all of us. It's been going on for a while, but it's exciting to think that I can be part of that, and that is one of the neat things with PBS, though. I will say this, is that we have a creative control. There's no there's essentially no suit and tie guy looking over my shoulder saying, you have to do this, you have to say that. It has to be like, we come up with the creative ideas and find the stories and bring it together. Now we have to pitch the ideas, and it helps to get underwriting. You can't do stuff for free. But that is nice. Whereas I think a more corporate type documentary, like if you were going through channels like Netflix and others, there's going to be a lot of censorship or editing above you. Just put it that way. Decisions made outside of your control. And I know that's something that even Ken Burns, not to make this about him, but I know that that's something he's even discussed, with PBS. He's always enjoyed that freedom and flexibility to speak his mind, and whether you agree with it or not, I mean, to just put it out there, the research that he brings to the film.
Speaking of production, when you're approaching a new area, like specifically with your hometown series, how do you decide where to start?
Yeah, like where to start? Okay.
Yeah, because that can be tough when you're covering a county that has maybe hundreds of years of history and a large population.
Yeah. It's a lot in any location. It's a given. It's going to be a lot to bite off. So you have to pick your slice, so to speak, and run with it. Hometowns, the show itself is really asking, well, ask a few questions, but the two main questions at its heart are, why or how is this place a place? How is this here? Why is this here? And then the second kind of follow-up question is, why do people still choose to call it home?
Yeah.
And those are kind of the leading questions. I've obviously had the benefit in season 1 with that show to be vaguely familiar with some of these locations, some more than others. I'll confess, Carroll County I didn't know as much about. And so that's more uncomfortable, because you don't go into it with a lot of your own ideas, but it's also probably better because I don't have a lot of my own, preconceptions of what a place may or may not hold. So you really have to go in with a lot of research. We scout an area out first. We try to just see what's here, what's in this county. So we call it a FAM trip, a familiarization trip. And we'll kind of, what are the sites? What are the locations? What is here? What's here to see? What's here to do? We try to avoid the almost obligatory tourism piece.
Sure.
Here's the 5 things to do and see in, whatever town.
It's in the outhouse, Carroll County.
Yeah. So yeah, we know there's the large flea market, right? There's the shooting that happened at the courthouse, right? The infamous shooting. There's the Fiddlers Convention. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but I didn't want it to I don't want any of these things to come across as, here's like the marketing tourist brochure and here's the 10 things. I draw a lot of inspiration. Are you all familiar with Anthony Bourdain?
Mm-hmm. I'm not.
He's got he's had a show. It's called Parts Unknown. Well, he's had several shows, but Parts Unknown is really good. And in his, he goes globally, travels globally, and I like his approach. It is a travel show, but it's not. It's more of like what I call like cultural journalism. You know, it's commenting on what you see and what the history of a place is. I've been very careful because I also write hometowns, and I've tried not to write myself into the episodes
Right. Yes.
very much to get in the way. Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to interject a lot of my own, thoughts and ideas like Tony did in his show. I mean, you're constantly hearing his inner thoughts right throughout the episode. So mine is much less that. And I really just want to be kind of the guide that's like, here's this place, and then turn your attention to that, so we can kind of pal around and go see this place.
Yeah.
But yeah, so back to your question, we start with a familiarization trip, scout out the area, and then we try to find characters.
Yeah. That was the follow-up question. That must be challenging.
Yeah.
Especially in Carroll, because we're a fairly large county with 33,000 people. Mm-hmm. How do you find people who are A, are willing to talk, and B, who have a story to tell?
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So the first question that I said that the show is trying to answer, the more historic question. So we might lead by reaching out to the local historical societies.
Okay.
Of a place, right. And sometimes we will get more than we bargained for. It's like, wow, we do a 2-hour sit-down interview with just this person. And so sometimes that is very fruitful. We can even get interviews out of that, like we did in Carroll County.
Yes.
And then those people, we just start talking. It's really just a conversation. Right. And we ask people, like, who should we talk to next? Who are the characters here? Who are the people, right? And one referral will lead to another. It's just, it's kind of networking. And sometimes it's the cinematic verite, right? It's the truth in film. It's as it unfolds. So there's not a lot of pre-scripting here. So sometimes it is like we go into a restaurant or coffee shop or, sit down like that. And we just start striking up conversations with people near us.
Yeah.
And
we
find the characters that way. And that's been, interesting. Or they may have someone to refer us to.
Yeah.
Do you find it hard to write the story of a place in under 30 minutes to really capture the feel of a place?
Yeah.
Because the people that live there are going to know the feel of the place. And I'm sure watching it, they're going to have their own thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing, the overwhelming feedback, kind of like what you led the top of the show with, that we've been getting from all the different localities, and this is what we strive for, is that when the people who live in these towns and counties, when they watch it and they're like, they get us, they nailed it. And then they're like sharing it on social and this type of thing. There could be no greater or more humbling praise than that, And so I really just try to take the facts of what people have said and not try to, get too artistic with the storytelling and get too far away from the truth of the matter. It's just very factual, but try to make it interesting. We try to get some engaging people on here to talk and tell us about a place. So I'm sure, there's especially the larger a place too, you absolutely have to pick your slice and just run with it. I even, at the season finale, we were in Abingdon, probably by far the largest populated area we've tried to film yet. And I just right off the top of the show, I'm like, look, I said it, I've got to pick my slice here. There's a lot of different, directions I can go. So yeah, it's challenging. And I don't even have 30 minutes, guys. I've got to get it done in like 26 minutes. So, because they have credits and everything else.
Of course. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's got to be hard. We've already surpassed 26 minutes, and I still feel like we have a lot left to go.
Yeah.
How do you take, because I'm sure you have hours upon hours of raw content. How do you selectively decide what you're going to include and what you're going to cut out?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I will say this. You can do the spray and pray method where you just go out and you get a ton of footage of an area.
Yes.
And you hope you capture it all, right? But then on the post-production side, and we are a very small team right now. It is just the two of us.
Okay. Wow.
In the field currently still. We're trying to grow. It's a very small, young station. And then, we've got administrators above us, but as far as actual producers, editors, we're it. So we wear a lot of different hats that ordinarily, as a director, producer, you're out in the field, you're doing this, and then this is going on to the next team for post-production. You're over, you're over it all, right? Calling the shots and move this here and do that. But we wear all those hats. So in post-production, we've tried to get better with the process of getting our interviews, finding our characters, letting them speak on camera, listening very carefully to what they're telling us, and then getting footage of those things that they're telling us about, right? That informs us. So in camera, we're essentially are editing in camera, because then we can go and we can find those locations, we can film and shoot those, and get it from every different angle that you can imagine, to get the master shots, all the tight but nice, pretty, tight shots, and then drone and so on. So yeah, that's largely how we inform what we shoot. Otherwise, I mean, like I said, it is
Kind of
just
broad.
broad.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the drone shots too. In the specifically the Carroll County episode, there's a wide range of beautiful drone shots that are used. Does your team fly the drone and record that, or do you delegate that to someone else?
Yeah, so it just depends. Like we have contracted some things out, Okay. So sometimes, and this actually goes back to your previous question. Maybe the weather is not cooperating. Maybe when we do our trips there to shoot and whatever, it's pouring the rain. You can't send a bird up in the sky then. So, we might subcontract and have, another drone operator come out, because we do. We have a drone operator and another camera guy that doesn't work for PBS, but it's subcontract too.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe we're 2.5 man production. Okay.
Sure.
That's
See, I actually wanted to touch on that. Obviously, there's a lot of video editing involved. Do you handle the video editing yourself, or do you kind of subcontract that out as well?
Yeah. So on Hometowns, all the writing and all the editing is done by this guy. And so
awesome.
the cinematography is shared between myself and Jacob. He does a lot of the producing, as far as, sometimes when it comes to like reaching out, making the extra phone calls or whatever. And sometimes we share that responsibility, but he'll largely wear that hat just to help, balance it. We're both kind of quasi directing this thing. So, we're just juggling right now. But yeah, all the editing he will do. He does phenomenal work with overall finessing and edit.
Right.
I'll get it together, and then we will collaborate and kind of work it down until it's like its final version. And that, that's like graphic effects, like maps or moving sequence pictures and things like that. He does some witchcraft there. I mean, I'm telling you, he's really talented. And so it just brings it together. The collaboration is very nice in that respect.
It sounds very similar to what we have going on. I handle most of the technical aspects, like editing and publishing, and then Luke really, for the most part, handles all of the scheduling, right? Of course, I do some things here and there, but Luke does the heavy lifting there. And we make a great team. Like you said, it's really important to have each person wear a hat of some sort so that everything is done.
Yeah. Collaboration can get you really far, and that's something that I know a lot of content creators talk about, is that they wish maybe that they had started collaborating earlier in their journey. So hats off to you fellas.
Thank you.
Good job.
I don't know if you can answer this or not, but what has been your favorite hometown of season 1 of Hometowns?
Yeah, good question.
You don't have to say Carroll. We'll understand.
I appreciate a lot of the commonalities that I find in a lot of the places. With regards to Carroll, I like how it maintains a lot of the and again, maybe because I'm biased here, but when we were there, we were just getting hit with the music, at every turn. There was a guy on the bagpipes. There were people playing their fiddles. I mean, it was a good time. So I really appreciate that kind of old time, mountain music still being front and center, in an area, in a location. I know it's not like that 365 days a year there, but I do appreciate that. That's something that is celebrated at least, and they make a big to do about it with that festival. I think, and it may sound, but it's very far removed, what feels like far removed from much of the state of Virginia. And I know a lot of them in Lee County, they feel somewhat forgotten by the rest of the Commonwealth, right, because they are the westernmost county in the state. And I don't know what it is. I'm just drawn to that area. And I think because it is so steeped it was like the funnel through which all Western, or the majority of Western migration and development went right through the Cumberland Gap, Yeah. And I've just had this like kindred. There's just something there for me. I don't know what it is about the place, but I think maybe it's kind of that overlaying in my mind, the history of the place. And there are, a couple favorite stops of mine down there in Lee County. So I love going down there. Big Stone Gap was so hospitable. I really loved that community. They seem to be so tight knit and so close. And that was really good to see. I think it's a good example of what other southwestern counties, especially as you get, closer to the kind of the coal field region. I think it's just a good example of what could be, more downtowns, more communities. You can do these things, if you kind of work together. I don't know, guys, I could keep going on. I think maybe I like a little bit of every one of them. And I like how some turned out better than others in the edit, or I like certain aspects, of how, wow, that really came together. I was really perplexed, like with the Marion episode. I don't know if you got to watch that. I was a little apprehensive. It's a large enough place that there's plenty of content there. But at first, through the scouting kind of trip and everything, it just felt very siloed. Like a lot of places, like I told you earlier, a person here would refer us, oh, you need to go talk to so-and-so, or you have to get, such and such to tell you this about that thing that happened. There, it was like there was plenty of successful like business owners and people and whatever who liked their town. But at first, it just felt hard to kind of penetrate and find what is the story here? How do we go from one to the other? And again, through just a happenstance type of encounter, we went into a little barber shop and found this exquisite artwork on this barber's wall. And it ended up being the artwork of a gentleman who had passed away, who Jacob, we'd actually gotten to film previously. And anyway, sorry, guys, I just got a notification here. My battery's about to die. Did I really forget to plug this in? And we're live. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, you're
hey, guys,
it's all good.
Can we hit pause? Can we hit timeout?
Yeah.
But yeah, so my train of thought, I got a little distracted there, but we went in that barber shop, and it was really fascinating because the artwork on the wall was the artwork of a gentleman who had passed away that we'd interviewed previously. And in talking with the barber, the son of this man, each picture had an interesting story about that community, different like towns within that county or that space. And so that really began that process of like opening up the story of Marion, and enabled us to kind of weave a narrative and go again, find one person that led to another. And I don't know, man, it was a wild little ride, but it was neat to see how that one came together in the end.
I think hometowns are so cool because you see a lot of stories about Wall Street, but not many about Main Street. And so to go into those, those downtown areas and to see where people really live, it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of similarities between the counties of Southwest VA. How do you differentiate when you're telling those stories?
I just let the place lead. The place tells its own story, and that's where I try to be respectful of not overly interjecting myself and too many of my own thoughts in the writing or the narrative, and really do try to let that place tell its own story, speak its own words. And I will try to, in the narration and the writing, will try to summarize where I need to, to weave it together. But that's what differentiates it, is each little local community. They actually are different enough to tell their own story. And that is something that I wondered when we first went into this. I was like, that's just a county over, or that's just so many miles away. Is it really going? And you watch each episode, you get a feeling that each one of those it's truly distinct. It doesn't necessarily feel like a carbon copy, the one before, the one after. So just let it speak.
Do you see similarities in groups that live in certain areas, like in one area of the county? Do you see people that tend to live in one community differ from the next community over?
Within the same county?
Within the same county.
That's a good question. I guess it depends. Let's face it. Technology and economics, that kind of those are huge drivers, right? So, for so long, a lot of the underbelly of Southwest Virginia was single source economy. It revolved around coal. And so a lot of places are struggling in the aftermath to reimagine their present and their futures. Some are doing better than others, I'm finding that, like, again, with the example of Big Stone Gap, they realize it's their people. Their people are what's so endearing and what's so engaging. That's why people are coming there and moving from places like California or whatever, because they fall in love with the people, and the stories of that area. So to try to answer your question, I guess a little more succinctly, is in a lot of places, people have been affected by that. In some areas, you see similar struggles, trying to retool, reskill, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. Some areas are going better than others. I think, again, also proximity to interstates, that also has a big role.
A big one in Carroll.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I also think with the technology thing, it's difficult for people to work remotely or do certain jobs if they can't have access, to like high speed internet and things like that. That's more available in some locations, but it's not in others. Right, and so you will see that kind of repercussions. You'll see, well, this place only has like a dollar store and that's about it. Whereas this over here is quite developed, and it's got a lot more going on. So there's commonalities. I don't know if I answered your question very good, but
well, you talked about people moving in, especially in the Carroll County episode. We've seen that a lot here. People do move in from other states because they do like the area, partly because it's naturally beautiful, but because of the people also. And you really highlighted in the Carroll County episode, almost everybody you interviewed talked about how safe they feel here.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before. Me and Ethan are both runners, and we never really feel scared running down the road around here because it is home. And maybe that's not the wisest, but you do have a sense of safety in your hometown.
Sure.
You really do.
Yeah.
Sure.
Speaking of safety, wondering about this, is there ever any difficulty in covering the negative aspects of a county, or do you try to kind of leave that out? Because every place has its issues.
Yeah. Like you hit on that a little bit in the introduction to the Carroll County episode.
Yeah, but is that something you kind of avoid, or do you welcome it?
Yeah, good question. So it's an intentional choice that I'm making thus far I don't want to fetishize what's very common and very clickbaity with what I call poverty porn, ruin porn. It's this kind of it's putting a spotlight on the most vulnerable, on the most downtrodden, the worst. I've made kind of the intentional choice not to linger on that. Okay, that's all. I'm just choosing. There's 26 minutes, right, that I get to show a place. Now, if you watch the Lee County episode, okay, going back there, you will get a very raw look at some of those realities. Even we specifically selected the artist at the end of the episode. Did an excellent job. Neil, he performed a song that he wrote, and the lyrics are hard hitting. They're very hard hitting, and it talks about the struggles of a small town and some of these post-industrial conflicts and issues that are very challenging to face. But instead of lingering on that, because this was something that I noticed when on a recent trip I had up towards, I was in DC, and believe it or not, fellas, there were entire blocks that were like tent cities. Okay. Like tent cities, tents everywhere. I'm assuming displaced persons, people that don't have homes to live in. I don't know. Maybe it was free camping, but I doubt it was free camping. I think that it was something else. My point is, I could go there with a camera, and that's all I could show you, right? I could show you all the needles on the ground, and I could intentionally block out any of the buildings and surroundings, and you would think the nation's capital is like a post-apocalyptic, dystopian reality. It's like, what is this? If that's all you were ever shown, and I feel like in the case of Appalachia and this type of thing, bringing this full circle, I think that that's predominantly what Appalachia gets portrayed as. So there's plenty of that. There's plenty of that out there. If you want to go find it, go for it. It doesn't take much more than a search on Google or YouTube. You'll find some video mocking or ridiculing or even over-exaggerating, overstating certain things. And I'm not going to mention any documentaries specifically, but there have been some that in recent years are basically having to eat their words because a lot of stuff was exaggerated and very overstated. But it was the way they portrayed a place, nonetheless, to fit their narrative. And that's where your facts have to be what you anchor all the artistry and all the cinematography, the overall storytelling. All of that has to be anchored in the facts. And so, yes, there are realities of drug use and other things that have impacted maybe disproportionately, segments of Appalachia. And we could, get into those details and whatnot. But
that is actually kind of relevant. We recently were Dope Sick, and I was kind of wondering because we hadn't gotten a chance to watch the Washington and Lee County episodes, but I was wondering if it was mentioned.
Yeah. So, that's the thing is like, there's plenty of statistics, there's plenty of numbers, there's plenty of stuff that we can highlight. And I'm sure, because it's actually, I kind of consider myself a collector of ideas. I mean, you have to be as a filmmaker. And if you're going to do documentaries, you're always collecting. Right. Somewhere in that repertoire there, in my bag of tricks, there's something in there about drug use in Appalachia. What will my take be like? I don't know, but I am willing to let research and things like that change my opinion, because I don't want to interject too much of my own bias in there.
Sure.
Every rose, they've got their thorns. There's warts and all involved in this. And we do show those things throughout the show, but I just don't linger on it. That's not the intention. I just don't linger.
So. And Appalachia does get, I think, a lot. Appalachia has a lot of stigma against it, especially in the broader country. And you hear that a lot. You really do. But and people say, why don't you just leave? I think you highlight that really well in the show. Talking about how people's families have been there since the Revolutionary War and how they really have a connection to the area. I thought that was very well done on your part. How it's still special to people.
And to those people, I tell them, well, why don't you just leave? I mean, what's so great about where you live? And why do you live there? Well, they might give you similar sounding reasons as the people who live in these other areas. It's home. This is where we live. Plus, we could get into, now this goes back a ways, fellas, but, there's been a lot of yellow journalism. There were a lot of concerted efforts decades ago to label, I think very unfairly, and stigmatize people of the region, as uncouth, as as hillbillies and this type of thing. And a lot of that was done to drive people off their lands, to seize lands, eminent domain. This is no, conspiracy theory. This is well publicized now that efforts were made, on many different levels to cast people as almost subhuman, as not as less thans, right? As others, people that we could just take from and without recourse, because they're just uneducated, backward hillbillies. They're not even using that land for its highest, best use. So we need to take it, turn it into a park because they don't need it. They don't deserve it. And then if you drum that up enough in the papers, and it's called yellow journalism, well, what do you know? People start to actually think less about other people. We never see that being done today, but it's a tool and a tactic that's been used for a long time. I think we're getting wiser. I hope we're getting wiser to those things today. I think it's more sophisticated today, but we all have access to much more information, so we don't have to just take what's spoon-fed to us. Right. I think we can make more informed decisions about how we view other people and what's being told to us. At least I hope so.
In this season, you really focused in on Southwest Virginia. Do you intend to go far north or far south in Appalachia?
Yeah, that's the goal. So season 2, production for that, we're already kind of working on the outline for it. Right. I think about half of the season we'll continue to round off any of the other remaining counties or locations within Southwest Virginia that we haven't. Yeah, season 2. So we're already outlining season 2. And within that, the first half of that season will round off any of the counties or locations within Southwest Virginia that we haven't touched on yet. Right. And then probably the latter half of season 2, we will begin to broaden the scope of the hometowns and places that we go to, so that by season 3 and so forth, we'll get further and further out.
So this is something you're looking to do for multiple years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the goal too with our our station, obviously PBS Appalachia, is to serve Southwest Virginia, and with that more broadly, Central Appalachia. But we would also like to create within it kind of our own special projects division. So we would become, our goal is to be a kind of the production powerhouse. There's only a few production houses within PBS that produce 99% of the content that comes on PBS. Okay. Like everything from, Bob Ross to, you name it, right? There's only a few little stations throughout the country that produce all that national level content. So it is our goal to not only continue to shine a light on this region and this area, but also to have national level productions that are seen, across the country. Stuff that may end up on Netflix or wherever, but it's also, it's housed right here and coming out of PBS Appalachia.
Yeah. So is that something you're looking to do in the future? Getting your content on maybe Netflix or Hulu or some of like the streaming services, or are you looking to keep it mostly like YouTube and your website?
Yeah. So, I mean, like me personally, that's its own thing, Mountain Roots Productions. Right. I am working on somewhat of a transition in the content. This year, I wasn't able to keep the pace like I did last year, obviously, because this year I had not only hometowns, but we have 2 other main shows that we are producing as well.
I think Musician.
Life of a Musician. And then the other one is French Magnolia Cooks. Yeah. So there's 3 shows we're actually shooting and producing and doing all this stuff for. I just happen to be the host of the one because it's very parallel to what I was doing with Mountain Roots. So it's kind of a 2-pronged approach. For Mountain Roots, I think I will. My roots are always in the mountains, Appalachia. Storytelling is just kind of in our blood here, right?
Yeah, it really is.
At my farm up here, it's like, I could be driving around or something and a neighbor waves you down and you are not getting away with less than a 20, 30-minute conversation because people like to talk. We like to tell stories. And so that will always be an essence of like what I do with Mountain Roots Productions. but I want to continue to evolve as a filmmaker and grow. And so it may not always be something I'm doing in Appalachia, but I really do want to get more into like independent documentaries that I'm producing myself and going to film festivals and that type of thing. And sure, Netflix, Hulu, wherever. But PBS Appalachia itself is, like I said, it's the nation's first all digital, all streaming station. So it's kind of a weird way to think about PBS, because usually it came through rabbit ears wrapped in aluminum foil. But most of us have been streaming our content for over a decade now. So we're just trying to bring like PBS and stuff into that new era that so many people are already living in. So that content will continue to stream, and sure, some of it might make its way on other platforms or whatever. But yeah, because there is some crossover even on the PBS side.
I do have a question. We mentioned, I think Luke mentioned John Bernard earlier, the director of the $2 Bill documentary and author of the $2 Bill book. Have you thought about maybe making a compilation of like lessons learned from the hometown, or maybe a summary text, like a book?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Takes off, I'll send you a check. No.
Okay, awesome. Great.
That's interesting. Kind of like behind the scenes. And
because we've talked about doing something like that with our episodes.
Yeah. So that's kind of it's very apropos, because like right now I'm actually working through the process in my mind of how to reposition the Mountain Roots content, and it's very much overlaid with what I'm doing with PBS too. So I'm almost seeing some of the Mountain Roots stuff shifting to kind of behind the scenes of a lot of the other, stuff I'm producing, documentary wise, PBS wise. I do have a few little book ideas in mind. I don't know if I've necessarily thought about it in those terms, like Life on the Road or Lessons Learned, but that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Put in my notebook.
Yeah. Happy to help.
How did you pick Carroll County to make the show about that episode?
How or why? Is there a
both actually? Because I thought about that. There's only so many episodes you can put in a season, and there's a lot of counties and towns and areas in Southern Appalachia. How do you pick which one you're going to do it on?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's not a ton of secret sauce for season one, other than kind of our mandate goal was, let's capture the 14 to 19 or so counties and or towns, et cetera, that are kind of generally what we think of when we say Southwest Virginia. Time just did not permit to do more than 10 episodes. Is that what we? Gosh, guys, it's been a blur. I think we did. We landed on 10 episodes. Yeah. So we picked these strategically. That one actually came in. Jacob, he actually has some property there, and so it was just like one of those things that, hey, I've got some land up there. Okay, let's go there. But we definitely it was going to get in the canon of hometowns anyway, because that was our goal to get all of kind of Southwest Virginia within the first couple of seasons of this show. But I like the area too. I mean, I've driven through a little bit, like on Blue Ridge Parkway. Gone down to Galax a time or two. So
of course,
around
August.
Yeah, so it needed to make its way in there. Plus, I also knew Amanda, who I interviewed at the top of the episode.
Okay.
Dalton. So
the courthouse.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we've
been there. We've been there many times at that.
That was kind of neat. We were joking earlier about how it's interesting to see places and maybe people on TV or whatever, right? And Luke and I have ate at that specific bench multiple times, and it's just neat.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? And that's something else too. Like whether it's the drone cinematography or just the things that we capture, because I'm guilty of it too. The place that I live, you just get not numb to it, but you kind of get blind to it. I mean, it's just you're there every day. You see that store, that place, that thing. You don't really give it a second thought, or you're certainly not sitting down there with a camera, like zooming in on it and like getting these shots. And so it's always interesting to hear that type of feedback because people tell me that I've lived here for 30 years and I've never heard that story or seen that thing, or I love how you showed that. I've never seen it from a drone like that. So it's very rewarding, to get that kind of feedback that people really appreciate the way that maybe they're getting to see their own hometown in a new light, because it's like seeing something that you care about with new eyes, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And here, I have a slightly, I guess, logistical question. Have you ever had anyone agree to be recorded but not to be published, so that you can use their story but not mention them or show their face? And if so, how do you handle that?
Yeah, there's one gentleman in particular who, really wanted this guy. Great storyteller, phenomenal. Somewhat of almost a mentor to me too. But we could not get him to agree to be on camera, So that was a bummer. We, at least not like speaking, that type of thing. Right. So we kind of filmed around it, his, without giving too much away, his location is within frame of one of the scenes, but it's not, we're not focusing on it. We're not going inside of it. We're not. We just have to. You have to respect people's wishes. I'm not trying to be a gotcha type, journalist or anything like that.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. Has making an actual documentary changed the way you view watching documentaries? Do you see it in a different light now?
Oh yeah. This whole filmmaking journey that I've been on, the very intentional, right? But like I would say, starting around 2020. I began picking up the camera. I began throwing videos on YouTube. And other than a few mercy views, like sympathy views from friends and family, like, oh, poor Josh, he's doing it again. Let's hit like, the 30 people that watched. All that content's gone, by the way. I'm just saying that. I certainly, again, appreciate watching stuff, but I didn't really know from a technical point of view, I couldn't quite articulate it intelligently, Yeah. Like I could, this is that, but I didn't really have a language. I didn't have the words. I didn't have the structure for that. So, beginning last year, when I started, I call my de facto film school in the field, jumping in the deep end. From then until now, yeah, absolutely. Every time I watch a film, I watched Napoleon the other night. And it might be weird to hear that, I went late at night because it was the only time I could get away. My schedule's insane. I went by myself to watch like a 3-hour movie. I know that sounds weird, but I'm watching it. I'm watching it both from like appreciation of history, but also the critical eye, because I was hearing the way this thing was shot. And I was like, well, I want to see how they did that, this type of thing. So yeah, almost everything I'm watching now, I'm like, oh, there was some camera shake, or oh, they used a 35 millimeter on that. Oh, wait, I see what they did there. So I'm seeing different levels and layers, not only the story arc, characters and those dynamics, but also what most people wouldn't even, I'm like, what did they do? How did they like that? They must have had a 600D on that. I'm just like all this technical language that before I didn't know. I had no clue. No clue.
I kind of get a similar feel when I'm listening to podcasts, because a popular podcast that Luke and I both listen to is the Lex Fridman podcast, and he publishes not only an audio component but a video component as well. And you'll see his setup, and it's really interesting to see how he does things. And he
really inspired this show.
Right. So. We both listened to the podcast, and we were like, oh, hey, we should do that. And here we are. But
send me a link to his show. Send me a link to his show.
Okay, for sure. I will. Yeah,
I'll check it out.
It's really good. It's very conversational.
Yes.
It can be very light but very deep too. Mm-hmm. And he has a wide range of different people on.
Yeah, he's got more than 400 episodes now, so he's been doing it for a long time.
Yes, and from people you've never heard of before to Jeff Bezos. So it's a wide range of people.
Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, he really we both were real big fans of him. Mm-hmm. And we liked the way he sat down with people and had real conversations.
Yeah.
And so that really got us started. But yeah, like Ethan said, we've learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
He's learned more technical side, and me and him have both learned how to
ask
really approach and interview.
Yeah, so
questions.
That was leading up to my next question. How has your style of interacting with people and talking to people and then really interviewing people changed since starting your film journey?
Yeah, so I think I've had the benefit for a while now with the finance business I was telling you that I've operated for a number of years. That has gotten me very comfortable speaking with people and just listening, right? To not just try to push for a sale, but actually sit back and let people talk. You have to master, and this is something that I think has come naturally to me, but it's something now that I'm really working on, to hone as a skill, an intentional skill, and that is learning the art of the pause.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've heard a lot about that.
That can be very powerful, especially when you're the one asking the questions, because when you ask somebody a question, like when we came on here and you asked me like where I'm from, fine, good question. We need some small talk, right? To set up structure. Yeah, a structure for this thing. But those are just factual answers, It's when you get beyond that and you not just ask people and try to get the facts, but you ask the why type questions, like, why do you feel that way? Or what was going through your head when such and such happened? Those things. And then just pause, and just let people speak. And that's where you get the gold. That's where the story, that's where the three-dimensionality of a person comes out, not just spitting out facts like I was born here, I live there, I did this, but they really like let you see in the inner workings of that thing. So that's something that, in some ways, I guess I didn't really realize I was doing it, but there are some modules and courseworks that I take now for documentary filmmaking and so forth. And to hear these master interviewers talk, I'm like, oh, okay. So that's kind of worked around that. But now I've got again, going back to having a language for it and a structure for it. So now it's not just something that's coming naturally. It's like, okay, I'm going to really be intentional to keep doing this, or I'm going to tone that down because that's what cuts people off, or that's what pushes, causes people to recoil instead of like drawing them out. So yeah, constantly learning. Constantly have to learn.
Yeah, me and him are just trying to really figure that out right now. Yeah, because we've talked to a lot of people, but
some people are very closed in. They don't share a lot.
And some people we already know, so there's going to be that component there of familiarity. I can't speak today. But yeah, we know some of these people. So it's easy to talk to them, and then sometimes total strangers, it's very hard to talk to.
Yeah.
And when an interview's not going well, it's very obvious from the very beginning sometimes. But it's all about learning. Yeah. I think the important thing is keep on trying to learn.
Yeah.
Do you take any master classes and that type of stuff? That's something that I'm pretty interested in starting.
Yeah. You mean like the website master class?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I got a subscription to that. Those are good subscriptions, right? Those are good subscriptions.
Yeah.
They're not just ones that are going to just draw, make you a constant consumer, right? It's actually, well, if I invest this time, then I might actually learn a new skill or a new concept. So things like Masterclass, Skillshare, those are all great, and there's free stuff too, guys. Come on, we have YouTube now. So the thing that's nice though about like Masterclass is it's all curated. It's all curated. It's there for you, whether you want to go down a learning path or you just want modules on whatever. Whereas YouTube is just, you might be watching some stupid cat video, 1 minute, or a TED talk over here. You're listening to some neuroscientist talk about the complexities of string theory. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, YouTube's everywhere. So it's not curated. That's the only thing. But there's tons of free content even on YouTube that could help, instead of just mindless scrolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think as we're kind of nearing the end of our time, we have a few questions that we ask every interviewee, and I'll let Luke start.
Before we begin that, though, do you have any projects you want to plug for the future?
And then we can link these in the description as well.
Yeah, if you just, for now, guys, following me on, either my website, mountainrootsproductions.com or mountainrootspro.com, just for short. You can also find Mountain Roots on YouTube and Facebook. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's where I'll keep updating people as things progress. Or just PBS. You can download the free PBS app. You can look for the PBS Appalachia station, and you can find our content. You can look for hometowns. You can look for French Magnolia Cooks. You can look for Life of a Musician. So those are the things that you can go to find, the body of work that I'm building. There are a few other places too, but those are probably the main ones for now.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be sure to put those in the description.
Okay. Sure. But to end it, I have two questions, and Ethan has one last heavy-hitting one. What advice would you give to young people just making their way in the world?
Yeah. Well, seeing that I have 3 young people living in my home, I wonder about this every day. And I don't know your ages, and you don't have to tell me, but I think that it's important whether you are my children's ages, who are younger than you all, or yourself, or even somebody older than me. I think it's important to constantly continue to stretch yourself, to learn. Don't get so calcified that you only know one thing or about a couple of things. Try new things, learn new things. I see a rocket there behind you guys and a bookshelf full of books. I hope it's on a wide variety of stuff. I mean, maybe it's all about rocketry. I don't know. Maybe you guys are going to SpaceX or something, and that's awesome. But yeah, have because again, that kind of goes back to that classical education. It's the classic, Renaissance man type concept where you have an appreciation and a broad interest in many things. I think that just makes you a more well-rounded person. And again, for a younger person, I think that you want to explore broadly and not be too, and I know all the public school teachers out there, you just plug your ears on this one, but you don't have to pick what it is right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Like, you don't have to pick what it is. I'm almost 40. Okay. And I feel like I've lived multiple lives in that span of time, multiple careers, gone down different paths. You can reinvent and recreate yourself if you want to. Now, sure, there's going to be some turbulence, and certainly the further along you get into something and then shifting gears, it can be quite turbulent. So that's another thing. If you're making changes, I would say do it in a way that, sure, and I've done it both ways. I've done it where I just quit this and then I leap to that. That comes with a lot of turbulence. Or while I'm doing this, I start this, and then as this other thing grows, I can ease off of this, right? And I'm not trying to speak in parables here. I'm just like currently, like with filmmaking, I was doing the finance stuff, but I decided to do the filmmaking, and I got it to a point where I could essentially leave this. It wasn't just a stop and then leap, So learn broadly, guys, study broadly and read. I mean, reading is so important. If you aspire to do anything like filmmakers and so forth, if you aspire to be a good writer, a filmmaker, a storyteller, a creative person at all, you've got to read. I mean, I don't know of a good writer, filmmaker, storyteller, whatever, who doesn't enjoy reading, whether that's a physical book, an audio book, or just some podcasts. Like, you need to have input coming in.
Glean information.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And my next question is, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
All right, guys, let's see. 10 years. I don't know if I want to think about that number, but I try also not to be very rigid on setting goals like that, because I also like to be fluid to the opportunity. But I can tell you this, I desire to be telling stories and making more compelling stories that are not just names and dates regurgitated in a factual way about stuff that, I already know and maybe the audience already knows. I want to inspire people, and I think doing that through documentaries and this kind of documentary renaissance is probably the best vehicle I'll have to do that. because a lot of the Hollywood storylines are getting very tired and worn. You know, there's only so many fictional superhero movies and, you know, so forth that you can make. The storylines just kind of wear out. But I want to achieve that, I think, and there's plenty of room. There's plenty of room on that ladder for storytellers, filmmakers, whatever you have, to do that within documentaries. So I hope that we could sit down in episode 5010 with you guys in 10 years. And it's like, yeah, that dude's still making documentaries.
Yeah.
and people are like really moved by them and really, you know, inspired and compelled to, yeah. I think so.
That's awesome.
I think that's it.
And our last question is a bit of a doozy. We ask every person that we interview this.
It's always reflective of a person's character and really who they are as a person. And that is, what is the meaning of life to you?
Personally.
The meaning of life. 42.
Yep. Hitchhiker's Guide. I got that one.
The meaning of life. I find a lot of meaning, and the more I age, the more this deepens. And it is love. And I know that might just sound like such a cliche. Like, come on, gosh, like, couldn't you think of something more existential? I don't know, guys. When I'm on the road, when I'm filming, when I'm doing all these things, when I'm getting to meet new people, exciting people, going places and getting access to stuff that I never dreamed of, you know, that's all great. But in my heart, honestly, I'm back home with my wife. Like, it's just the love of someone else. And whether you find a significant other in your life, maybe it's a significant friend or, you know, whatever. It's that love. It's that connection. It's that human connection. I mean, that's all history is, really. It's just a collision of happenings and humans. Outside of that, what is it? So I find that it's, and I say love because that's what I crave the most, and that's what I think we all really want to be able to offer and provide. You know, we want to feel cared about, and I think deeply we want to care about others, because life gets pretty inward, navel gazing if you're just stuck in your own head and there's no one else to share that with. You can amass great fortunes and amazing experiences, but if you're alone, I don't know, that seems kind of a sad existence.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's something to do with love, and it's something to do with that human connection. And I think that that's all very spiritual. I think it's very connected to the divine. And I think that it has to be something there. I think that has to be. But you know what? I'm ever evolving. So that's where I am today. That's where I am today with that answer. Ask me again in 10 years. We'll see.
Okay, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you, sir, for coming on. It's been an honor to speak with you.
Yes. We've
Likewise,
really enjoyed it. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time, guys.